The silence was the hardest part. Officer Liam O'Connell drove his cruiser down the sleeping roads of Summit Ridge, the quiet so deep it felt like a physical weight. A year ago, this same silence would have been filled by the soft panting and occasional happy sigh of his canine partner, Bear. Now there was only a hollow void in the back seat, a space his new German shepherd, Max, occupied with a capable but distant stillness. The dog was a superb officer, but he wasn't Bear. And in the brittle 3 a.m. chill of the Colorado mountains, the ghost of a friendship lost was a cold companion. He was contemplating another lonely hour before dawn when the silence was finally broken. It started not as a bark, but a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the vehicle's frame. Max, who had been resting, was suddenly rigid, his ears pricked forward, and his golden eyes locked on a single weathered cabin tucked beneath the pines. "You see something, boy?" Liam murmured, slowing the car. Max answered with a sharp, urgent bark that splintered the night. It wasn't a warning about a person. It was something older, more primal. Inside that cabin, Clara Vance swayed gently, her infant son, Leo, a warm weight in her arms. She had moved to this quiet town to escape a past filled with noise and fear, but the wind howling outside sounded like a bad omen. Then came the barking, sharp and close. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she crept to the door and opened it to the sight of a police officer and the massive dog. "Ma'am, sorry to startle you," Liam began, lifting a hand. "My dog, he never finished." In a blur of black and sable fur, Max lunged forward, not with aggression, but with a desperate, focused purpose. His jaws closed gently on the sleeve of Clara's robe, and he pulled, hard, tugging her away from the threshold. She cried out in surprise, stumbling forward onto the gravel driveway, just as a deep, ancient groan rose from the very bones of the mountain. The ground shuddered once, and then with a deafening roar, the earth gave way, swallowing the cabin whole into a torrent of rock and soil. The world returned not with a sound, but with the scent of pine and freshly turned earth. When the dust from the landslide settled, it revealed a gaping wound in the mountainside, where Clara Vance's life had stood just moments before. She was on her knees in the gravel, clutching baby Leo, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Officer Liam O'Connell stood over her, his own shock a cold weight in his gut. His eyes were fixed on Max, who now sat quietly beside Clara, a steadfast guardian against the chaos. The dog hadn't just obeyed a command. He had acted on an instinct so profound it defied all training. "Are you hurt?" Liam finally asked, his voice rough. Clara could only shake her head, her gaze shifting to the magnificent animal. "No," she whispered, the words trembling in the frigid air. He saved us." In the sterile quiet of the Summit Ridge Sheriff's Station, that fragile sense of safety began to take root. The town, small but kind, had wrapped its arms around the mother and child who had lost everything. They were given a small furnished apartment on a quiet street, a temporary haven cobbled together with community donations. For 2 days, Clara moved through a fog of gratitude and disbelief. The constant, reassuring presence beside her was Max. Liam had arranged for the dog to stay with her, a silent, furry sentinel who never strayed far from Leo's bassinet. He seemed to understand his mission went beyond the rubble on the mountain. He was a guardian. The peace was shattered by the venomous whisper of a text message. Clara was folding a donated baby blanket when her phone chimed. The name on the screen made the blood freeze in her veins. Evan Blackwood, her abusive ex-husband. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The message was short, terrifyingly casual. "Nice new place, Clara. Cozy. Bet the baby cries at night. See you soon." He had found her. The mountains and the miles she had put between them had dissolved into nothing. The 4 walls of her safe little apartment suddenly felt like a trap. When Liam stopped by to check on her that evening, he saw the terror in her eyes before she said a word. She handed him the phone, her hand shaking too much to hold it steady. Liam read the message and a cold fury settled over him. He remembered the file from her divorce, the medical reports, the photographs she thought no one else would ever see. This wasn't just a threat. It was a promise from a man who had broken her bones before. "He won't get near you," Liam said, his voice low and firm. It was more than the promise of a police officer. It was the vow of a man who refused to let another vulnerable person be swallowed by the darkness. Their meetings became a quiet ritual. Each afternoon, Liam would take her and Leo to the town park, a place of open skies and laughing children. Under the shade of a willow tree, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. "I always made excuses for him," she confessed one day, watching Leo sleep in his stroller. "I told myself his anger was my fault." Liam listened, his gaze steady. He found himself sharing things he rarely spoke of his own quiet, emotionally distant father, of a loneliness he understood all too well. It was in these shared moments of vulnerability that a bond formed, deeper than gratitude, woven from mutual respect and the unspoken promise of protection. During this time, Liam's duties pulled him into another corner of the town's quiet struggles. A call about petty theft at the corner mart led him and Max to a shivering, half-starved boy of 13 hiding in an abandoned shed. The boy, Sam Jones, had run from a neglectful foster home. Instead of just processing him, Liam bought him a hot chocolate, his compassion overriding protocol. He saw in Sam another soul who needed a guardian, but the shadow of Evan was never far. One evening, while walking Max near Clara's apartment, the dog suddenly stopped, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He stared intently at an alley across the street, where a tall figure melted back into the darkness. Liam's heart pounded. Evan wasn't just texting anymore. He was here. He was watching, and he was waiting. The fragile piece of Summit Ridge was a lie, and the night knew it. While Officer Liam O'Connell was miles away responding to a minor fender bender, a call that felt frustratingly routine, the real danger was closing in. He had left Max in the cruiser, a standard precaution, never imagining the dog's instincts were about to override every command he'd ever learned. Inside her small apartment, Clara Vance moved through the familiar motions of her evening routine. The soft lullaby she hummed for Leo a stark contrast to the fear coiled in her stomach. She placed her sleeping son in his crib, her hand lingering on his back. It was then she heard it, not a loud crash, but a sound far more terrifying. The soft, metallic click of the back door lock, which she knew she had bolted. She froze, her blood turning to ice. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. He was inside. Evan Blackwood stepped from the shadows, his frame filling the doorway. He wasn't yelling. His voice was a venomous calm that was worse than any rage. "You really thought you could hide from me, Clara," he said, taking a step forward. She backed away, her hand fumbling for her phone on the counter. Her mind screamed, but no sound came out. As he lunged for her, the night exploded. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the sound of shattering glass. A blur of black and sable fur burst through the kitchen window in a shower of glittering shards. Having sensed Clara's terror from 2 blocks away, Max had bolted from the patrol car, a silent missile of pure loyalty. He crashed into Evan with the force of a freight train, driving him backward to the floor. There was no savage attack, only a low, menacing growl as Max pinned the man's arm, his body a tensed shield between the intruder and the family he had claimed as his own. Seconds later, the front door burst open. Alerted by Max's GPS tracker the moment the dog left his designated zone, Liam had raced across town, his heart pounding with a dreadful certainty. He found a scene of controlled chaos. Evan pinned to the floor, Clara sobbing with relief, and Max standing guard unbroken. "Don't move!" Liam commanded, his weapon steady. The fight was over. The Guardian had held the line. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of Clara's apartment in silent, pulsing waves, a chaotic heartbeat in the wake of the storm. The scent of the cold night air filled the room through the shattered window, mingling with the smell of splintered wood. Evan Blackwood was gone, swallowed by the official machinery of justice, but the echo of his presence remained. As Liam spoke quietly with his fellow officers, Clara clutched a sleeping Leo to her chest, her gaze fixed on Max. The dog sat faithfully at her feet, his body relaxed but his eyes still watchful. The terror that had paralyzed her for years was finally receding, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar clarity. This time, silence would not be her shield. It never had been. So when the victim's advocate from the district attorney's office arrived, a compassionate woman named Eleanor Hayes, Clara didn't hesitate. He has a pattern, Ms. Hayes said gently. We need your voice to stop it for good. Clara met her gaze and nodded, her voice steady. Then I will speak. The story spread through Summit Ridge like wildfire in a dry canyon. It was no longer just about a miraculous escape from a landslide. It was about a second, more deliberate act of courage. The local paper dubbed Max the Guardian of Summit Ridge, and his story became a quiet legend. But the most powerful account came not from a reporter, but from the pencil of a 13-year-old boy. Sam Jones, hearing the tale of the dog who had saved the mother and child twice, began to draw. He sketched Max leaping through the glass, a protector in mid-flight. He drew him standing sentinel over Leo's crib. The raw, emotional power of his drawings captured the town's heart. They were shared online, printed by the local school, and became a symbol not of the darkness that had visited their town, but of the fierce loyalty that had driven it out. Amidst the paperwork and the quiet buzz of his newfound local fame, Liam found himself at a crossroads. Tucked in his locker was a letter he'd received weeks ago, an official offer for a transfer to a prestigious K-9 unit in the city, the very career step he had once strived for. It represented more pay, more action, and a path away from the quiet, sometimes lonely, life in the mountains. He pulled it out one evening, the crisp paper a symbol of a future he once wanted. He thought of the city's concrete canyons and anonymous crowds. Then he thought of Clara's quiet courage as she prepared to face her demon in court, of the profound, unspoken trust in his dog's golden eyes, and of the small, sleeping boy who might now have a future free of fear. He realized the ambition that had driven him for years had been replaced by something quieter, yet infinitely more substantial. He folded the letter, walked over to his desk, and penned his official rejection. He wasn't just an officer passing through. Summit Ridge wasn't just a post. It was a place he was needed. It was becoming home. The gavel fell in the quiet courtroom, not with a bang, but with the soft finality of a closing door. Evan Blackwood was sentenced to 5 years, his hollow eyes never meeting Clara's as he was led away. Clara didn't weep or smile. She simply exhaled, a long, slow breath she felt she'd been holding for years. With Liam standing tall beside her and Max resting his head on her shoe, she felt the immense weight of her past finally lift. The fear was gone, replaced by the solid ground of a future she could now build herself. A week later, she signed a lease on a small, sunlit storefront on Main Street. With help from Liam and a few town volunteers, she transformed it into Fern and Hearth, a cozy haven of secondhand books and local crafts that smelled of lavender and old paper. The community came, not to stare, but to shop, to chat, and to welcome her as one of their own. Their life settled into a gentle, reassuring rhythm, a quiet tapestry woven from small moments of peace. Liam's visits to the store became a daily occurrence, his patrol uniform often replaced by a simple pair of jeans. He'd bring coffee and listen as Clara spoke of book orders and plans for the future. Max, now a beloved local celebrity, would nap in a patch of afternoon sun by the children's corner, patiently enduring the gentle pats of toddlers. It was in that corner, between a shelf of picture books and the slumbering German shepherd, that Leo took his first wobbly steps, his small hands reaching not for his mother, but for the soft fur of his steadfast guardian. Liam saw it happen from the doorway, and the smile that reached his eyes held the warmth of a man who had found exactly where he belonged. As winter returned to Summit Ridge, blanketing the town in soft, clean snow, the annual Winter Festival was held in the town square. This year, Mayor Isabel Reed added a new ceremony. Under a pine arch glittering with frost, she placed a small, velvet ribbon around Max's neck. For courage that never wavered, and for loyalty that protected the heart of this town, she announced, her voice ringing through the crisp air, we name Atlas the Guardian of Summit Ridge. The crowd's applause was warm and heartfelt. Later, after the carols and cider, the square emptied. Under the soft glow of the street lamps, Liam, Clara, Leo, and Max stood together, watching the snowflakes drift down. Liam's arm rested gently around Clara's shoulders. They didn't need to speak. They had survived the collapse, withstood the storm, and now standing together in the light, they were more than survivors. They were a family. The story of Liam, Clara, and their guardian dog, Max, serves as a profound reminder that life's most valuable lessons often arrive not in grand pronouncements, but as quiet truths revealed in the aftermath of a storm. It teaches us to look for the guardians in our own lives, for they rarely appear as we expect. Sometimes they have forepaws and unwavering loyalty. Other times they are a steadfast friend who chooses to stay when it would be easier to leave, or even the resilient voice inside ourselves that finally decides to speak up. This tale beautifully illustrates that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the quiet resolve to move forward despite it. It is the courage to trust a new beginning, to rebuild what was broken, and to find strength not in anger, but in the profound act of protecting what we love. The story champions the idea of second chances, not just for a new home or a new friendship, but a second chance to define who we are. It suggests that our past does not have to be a life sentence. It can be a prologue to a story of resilience we are still writing. Perhaps the most touching lesson is about the nature of family. It reminds us that the strongest bonds are often not forged by blood, but by choice, sacrifice, and shared vulnerability. The family we build through loyalty and care can become our most secure harbor. In a world that can sometimes feel isolating, this story encourages us to remain open to connection, to nurture our communities, and to recognize the quiet miracles around us. For it is in these simple, steadfast connections, with people and the loyal companions by our sides, that we truly find our place to call home.